Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. And I know you just got done. Oh, we only have 5 people on. I'm going to wait. Wait until it populates up. We're getting everybody on. Here they come. Can somebody say something? I'm not sure if my audio is working.
Good morning.
Oh, good. It is working.
I think we're all muted.
Yeah. Usually it chimes when people come in, and I'm not hearing the chime. Is everybody else hearing the chime? Yeah, maybe I muted the chime at some level. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Spencer. A lot of the people are still on Classroom 3, so they're just trying to get connected to this one.
Oh, I think, you know what? I think they just need to log off and log back on, because this is also Classroom 3.
Okay.
But you do have to stop one and then join a new one.
Okay, great. I'll let them know. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we all just thought like, oh, we'll just stay on.
Just continue. I think I could do that since I'm usually kind of on there, but he logged off, I think. So I don't know. One of those other mysteries of Zoom that I'm still not sure of. I don't think we have too many contiguous classes, so yeah. There they come.
We made it to the other side.
Yeah. I love it. Live and learn.
I was not ready for it to be so cold this morning.
I know. So my bedroom is in an addition to the house. So it doesn't have air conditioning or heat, and we have our own little space heater and such. And so we usually sleep with fans and windows open and a French door open with the screen, and we had all that. Oh my gosh, both of our little dogs were underneath the covers, keeping me warm this morning. So
So every morning when we wake up, when we get the kids ready, we check Alexa with the weather. And so then we were like, what do you mean it's 50 degrees this morning? Like, our kids literally don't have any long pants.
We're from Texas.
Right? Like, where is this coming from? Because yesterday in Fort Worth, it was 100 degrees.
Yeah. It's crazy. And actually, I think by Wednesday or Thursday, it'll be back in the 90s here. So it's just a short reprieve.
And
Welcome to Research Methods. I think some of you stayed on the other class, and once he logs out, then I'm kind of stuck, even if I'm logged in. So you will always log out after Michael's class and then log back into the research methods class. And we always have that 10-minute gap, so you'll have a little bit of a break. So I'm glad you found us. And now when in the previous class, did it say Zoom 561 Classroom? I don't know why that is either. And it might be because I have my own Zoom account and it knows I'm logging in as somebody else. So yeah, another one of those Zoom mysteries. Well, welcome to Research Methods. I actually, the nerd in me loves teaching this class. I gave you a bit of a background of myself during orientation last week. And what I didn't tell you is that I did a lot of research. So I finished my master's degree in 1986. And I don't know why, but my husband just walked into my office and is sitting there, and oh, he brought me breakfast. Thank you, honey. It's very distracting. So yeah, I finished my master's program in 1986, and I went and worked at was then called Pocatello Regional Medical Center. But I finished my work at the University of Iowa in Iowa City and loved Iowa City, but was so excited to start my career. Came out west because I was born and raised in the western part of South Dakota, and I really missed mountains and clear skies and such. That's so nice. Thank you. I really miss that. So we came out west. I worked in a acute care and rehab hospital for a couple of years. And then we had our first child, so we went back to the Midwest to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And there I continued to work at a regional hospital that did critical care rehab. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I worked with people who had traumatic brain injuries, strokes, neurologic deficits, so, sometimes head and neck cancer patients. That was what I did for my CFY. I worked at a VA hospital almost exclusively with head and neck cancer patients and swallowing. So I'm a real jack of all trades. I went and then worked in the schools in a deaf and hard of hearing program because I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Drop Dead Gorgeous, but it's kind of a mockumentary on beauty pageants, and there's one character in there whose talent is sign language. I was that girl. My talent in junior high and high school was sign language, and I was just obsessed with deaf people, deaf kids. I had a little deaf friend when I was 3, and we communicated totally. And it wasn't until I was in junior high that a neighbor said, well, oh yeah, you were friends with so and so. He was deaf. And I was like, he was deaf? But so I've always had an affinity for deaf people. So after working in intensive care and really emotionally draining circumstances, I went to work in the elementary school in a deaf in a deaf and hard of hearing program, and I really literally thought I had died and gone to heaven because I absolutely, well, I loved having the school schedule and I loved working in that program. And interestingly, as this was in the early 90s, so then fast forward many years, many of those kids that grew up are now having, some of them are nearly grandkids, having grandkids, not quite, but that generation of kids, they've all found me on Facebook, which is so weird, but I'm not their speech clinician anymore. So, but it's really been interesting to follow their lives and to see where they went. Um, from that program, I then became a research assistant at the University of Iowa in a program that was looking at cochlear implants, looking at the efficacy of cochlear implants in prelingually deaf children. And in the early 90s, this was quite the, it was controversial at that point in time. People were just horrified that doctors were implanting children with a cochlear implant. And so I did that work for the next 15 years. And as I said, I got to watch these children literally grow up with cochlear implants. And then my next job, another interesting thing was as an assistant professor at the State University of New York in Geneseo, New York, which was a little program, but it was the first speech pathology program in the state of New York. So it was a very storied program. And it was very close to Rochester, New York, which has the Rochester Institute of Technology and the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. So my research work continued. Also, all of that work from the University of Iowa and kids with cochlear implants was then transferable to now these first and second generations of children who grew up with cochlear implants were in college. And many of them were at our RIT and TID. And so that continued my research. So over time, I have, I don't know, 40 publications, more, maybe more. I don't know. I don't count them, but so I really know how to start a research project, keep that kindling, that wood kindling fire going, and getting things published. So that's kind of the background of why I really love teaching this research class. This research class is also, hi, Dr. Sectum's here. The research class is also a segue into what your capstone project is going to be. So throughout this class, you'll be thinking of designs or projects or even just a topic that inspires you. So we'll be sampling different types of research just so that next semester when you have your capstone 1 project or capstone 1 class, you'll transfer this knowledge into what you want to do for your capstone. I know we had some questions about capstone on Friday. One thing I'll just give you an intro about is that the capstone projects here at Rocky Mountain are pretty open-ended. And you're only presenting, and I will tell this to you probably 5 times, but you'll still think you're writing a big paper. You aren't writing a big paper. You are taking information. You may be writing research in a paper format, but that's not what you're presenting. You present a poster of the project that you give. As part of populating your poster, some people put it in a paper format with an introduction, literature review, methods, results, and implications. But you never turn in a formal paper. Your culminating piece for your capstone is a presentation of a poster. So that's, I just want to make sure you understand that from the get-go. And your capstone is your choice. You'll pick a topic you like, and some of you will actually want to do a little bit of research and collect data and then present your data. Some of you will want to take a deep dive into the literature about a topic. So your whole capstone is a fairly extensive literature review. That doesn't mean you get out of doing an introduction or background and introduction and talk about your methods, because if you do a literature review, you'll talk about how you found your literature and what you did to come up with your literature review. And then for people that do a big literature review, their results are all is a summary of what they learned from their literature review, and then they go on to do implications. So some of you will do a study, some will do a literature review, some will do a case study because you'll run across a very interesting patient, or some of you even know people that are friends or family or relatives of family or something, or relatives of friends, I mean, and you want to really take a deep dive into that case study. Some of you are a case study. We've had that. We've had people who have had migraine conditions and they did a study on migraines. We've had students who've had nieces or cousins who have a syndrome, so they present a case study. And then we also have, I'm just giving you the main formats of capstone projects. The last bin is what I would just say a product. And some people come up with a product that they want to present. So they, well, we had one person who made an instructional video for people who were airport screeners. And so they made an instructional video about autism and people's families traveling with somebody who has autism. And so they did an instructional video of just background and information when you're screening a person with autism, and helpful. So those are the 4 categories of capstone projects. Before I kind of go into the research class, do we have any questions at this point? Okay.
So I had a random question.
Yeah, Jim.
Sort of about if we could. I've been really interested in like throat singing, like Mongolian throat singing.
Yes, I love it. Yeah.
If there's anything I could do research-wise that would be involved with like this form of like chanting, and it's like
That's, yes, there's so much, and that's something we'll continue to explore. So okay, so you've got so this is an example. The topic is throat singing. It's a way, it's it's not, I mean, I'm trying to describe it. It's not like
sharp
ventriloquism. Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
Sorry, it's like sharp rhythmic inhalations and exhalations. Yeah. And it's like among like traditional people like Mongolian or a lot of Native American groups do it as like a form of chanting.
Yeah, and that chanting also has meditative qualities and such. I'm sorry, I just kind of, I don't know, I have a really dry throat, so I'm choking a little, coughing a little. With throat singing, you could do a big literature review about throat singing and introduce it. So it could be something like a literature review and a demonstration. I don't know if you are a throat singer, but you could find video, or maybe you can find somebody who's a throat singer, or a project like that could even morph into, if you could find enough throat singers, you could do, if they're all over the country, you could do some type of uh, questionnaire and get data from them. Or you could, if we could bring them in, you could do endoscopy with them with Dr. Sectum. So that's just an example of how open-ended the capstone can be.
Yeah.
But oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, I was listening.
Yeah. So before we do that, and I know you're excited to think about your topics, we will go through and prepare you for the expanse of types of projects that you can do. And this class is a big part of that. So we're setting the foundation for doing research, or even doing a case study, or doing a project if it involves individuals, or doing a big literature review. So the class it's an hour. It's on Tuesday mornings. As you all know, we will be learning to understand the principles and ethics involved in evidence-based practice, where you will understand the process of research. And you will actually, and many of you have done some type of research or been involved in research, but you will for sure carry out aspects of research. You'll learn a little bit about different designs, and you'll learn to do some technical writing, because there is writing that will be involved on your poster. But you'll also learn to understand technical reports. So we'll be looking at articles and learning how to pull them apart and understand them. And we'll also understand the scientific method, because that's what you'll be going through as you write your posters. One thing I've talked about is city training. We have a couple people who've already done their city training. So these are what we're going to do. This class is nice because it's a 1-hour class. It's not, it's doesn't have a lot of course load, but there's readings and there's some preparation, and you will learn the APA, American Psychological Association citation format. The reason I picked APA is because most of the journals we would submit to as a speech language pathologist follow that notation system. We'll have some quizzes just to make sure you're keeping up with the reading, and there's a midterm exam on Canvas, which I say is open book. And you'll learn that my tests are open book, but you really do need to have been keeping up with things, because it will take you forever to finish the test if you can't, and you'll time out. So
what are the quizzes like? Are those open book as well? Are those something that we do after class, before class?
So quizzes are Socrative quizzes, and their quizzes we'll do at the beginning of class, and it's mostly real salient features from the book. So I want you to have read the chapter before the class, and that's your kind of double check to make sure that you've read them. So 6 quizzes, 5 points each. Yeah. And I don't want you to get really freaked out by them, because even though they're worth 5 points, so the way I do it is on Socrative, let's say there are 5 questions on the quiz. I know there may be concepts you don't understand, and this is like the quiz is being taken before class, before you've read it, but we haven't talked about it, and it maybe hasn't seeped in. But the way I grade the quizzes is somewhat on a sliding scale. So if you get 3 of the 5 questions, you get all 5 points. So you do have some wiggle room, but it is my assurance that you're at least attempting to read and understand the material before class.
For the Socrative quizzes, are we getting a link to that, or is that something we should have already been?
No, I will show you how to do that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing that I want you to do is city training. And the cool thing about this is you take it, you get the 20, you do it, you get the 25 points. And I'm going to just show you the link for city training. I know, I don't want to call anybody out, but if any of you have finished city training, I would love it if you would volunteer and just give your critique about how long it took you and what your impressions of city training was. Anybody want to share that experience?
I have a quick question about that.
Yeah.
I did city training back in my undergrad and it says it's still valid till 2022. Is that okay?
If you still have that certificate,
Yeah, I do.
that's perfect. I will warn you though. Yeah, no, if it's due till 2022, you're good because that's when you graduate. The reason I'm incorporating city training into the research course is that should you choose a type of capstone project that involves human participants, the university will make you we have to have city training. So I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're learning about research and ethics when you do city training, and then you're set if your capstone takes you in that direction. So if you've done city training, you can log back into the city training website and you can download your certificate and then upload it into the Canvas assignment.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
I
Thank
have
you.
something to add on to that. I just have a question. So
Yeah, Lena.
it doesn't have to be like RMU city training, because I have like
Oh.
revised common rule, responsible code of research, protection of human subjects, and good clinical practice. Is that?
Yeah, that's going to take care of it as long as it's still valid.
2022.
Yeah, so you're good. You're good. What
Cool.
you'll find with this city training, there's a link and there are different modules. And as you found out, you go through different modules. So Lena, do you want to just share your impressions if you remember? It probably wasn't too long that you took the city training.
Yeah,
What are your-
I did it in January last year.
Okay.
But honestly, they took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Like I would schedule out like an hour for each of the certificates.
Yeah.
I would say, at least that's just from what I remember. I remember it being like just really like a lot of long videos, but all of it was really interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
it gives you what you need. A lot of it was felt like common sense to me, but it was really important that they like emphasized it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Anybody else have any experience with city training they want to share?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Ethics one, I think the second one did take quite a long time.
Yeah.
So
You-
definitely just carve out some time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have until September. Did I give you till the 19th or 18th? Oh,
On Canvas, it says the 21st.
Oh, 21st. You know, I just looked my calendar. I haven't flipped it to September. It's still August, but yeah, so the 21st. It does take some time. I think it's interesting though. I do think it's interesting. And we are going to talk about some of the situations that come up in the city training or different ethical conundrums that are related to research. So yeah, you'll just follow this and you go through. If I remember correctly, you can save it. You don't have to do it all at one sitting. You can save it, work on it. Another thing I did, I had to do it last year, so I'm good for a couple of years. You know, I took notes, but I also did screenshots. Kept a file of screenshots. That's a tip that I would give you. I don't think
Oh,
that's
goodness, you are so correct. Because when you do the exams, if you get something wrong, it'll tell you what you got wrong.
yeah.
And so it'll like speed it up. I didn't realize
Hmm.
until like after doing a full one completely that like I could do it again
Yeah.
and get more points. So you can do it more than once.
Right. Right. And I did screenshots on the reading part too, as well. So then, because they go into like kind of minute detail, and you're like, oh, I don't remember if it was this or this. So if I had the screenshots of the reading, then I could check it out. So yeah, so that's city training. Um,
Is there,
so this week, oh, I
sorry,
think
is there a fee?
no,
Or, okay.
no. Um, so that's kind of the class in a nutshell. We will be following the text and kind of getting backgrounds. There's some very, and these first few weeks we're talking about ethics in research. And there are some really interesting ethical things that have happened in research that happened kind of at different points in history where we maybe hadn't even thought of things, and I think things are happening even now with medicine that are bringing up new thoughts and ideas relating to ethics that maybe we haven't even ever considered. Um, Before I share, oh my gosh, there's tons of chats. Oh, but nothing. Okay, okay. I'm okay. I'm okay on that. Um, so I'm going to share a different, yeah, it's still sharing. So are you seeing a PowerPoint that says Facebook and emotional contagion? Okay. Before I go into that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about an ethical, well, and maybe you know about this, but how many of you have read the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks? Or the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks? Some of you? Okay, yeah. It is, and it's also a movie, but so this is a story of a woman in the late 40s, early 50s who was from the South, African American descent, and she she went to Johns Hopkins University for her medical treatment because they had a lot of ability to care for people who didn't have means of paying for medical care. And unfortunately, Henrietta had cervical cancer. And at the time at Johns Hopkins, there was a research study going on that was trying to grow human cells in petri dishes, and the researchers had tried. They had like cell lines that they had tried to grow and then replicate and keep going. Kind of like if you've ever had sourdough starter, which is kind of something people are doing now. But if you have a sourdough starter, the sourdough starter starts kind of getting it looks yeasty, but there's no yeast in it, and you take out some of the starter, and then you make sourdough pancakes with the rest of what you have, and then that starter that you've taken out can be used to start bred another time. So you always take your starter out to kind of, it's not cloning, but it's letting you have that starter to continue the line. So researchers at Johns Hopkins were doing cell lines. Um, and so, Amy, I love it that you have a name for your sourdough starter. So Henrietta's cells were they were amazing. They're still living today. And because of Henrietta Lachs, Lachs, I think is how you spell it, HeLa, they were called the HeLa, Henrietta, Hela, the HeLa cells, they're still living, but from the HeLa cells, we got polio vaccinations. I can't even imagine, I can't even tell you all the different things that have come from the HeLa cells. The issue was back then, they didn't ever ask her, can we take some of your cells? They just did. They were doing a biopsy and they kept the cells and they grew. And then later on, somebody went back and told the family, did you know they cloned your grandmother or they cloned your mother or they cloned your aunt? And the story got very, I guess I would say, cattywampus or turned around, and it really frightened the family. They believed that there were clones of their loved one running around England and everywhere. And so that's one of the stories where we kind of talk about informed consent. And when we are, anytime we are working with humans, we have to do informed consent. And because of different stories like that, and you'll read more in your city training, we have had internal review boards. So internal review boards, if it's a human subject, has a whole branch to make sure that the study is ethical, that the person in the study understands what's going on in the study. But then there's also internal review boards for animal studies as well, to make sure we're treating animals in a humane way and that ethics are being followed. So one way I found to share kind of this idea of informed consent and why things are changing all the time, and we continually have to think about ethics and think about what's going to happen. Like right now, if you had any kind of surgery and they took cells from you or tissue from you and they did a biopsy, there are places where they can use your cells for different things. And you may not have consented to do that. So we still need to catch up quite a bit. So here's something that I found really interesting. So Facebook early on had let me see, a study about emotional contagion. And here's the essentials of that study. Over a 1-week period in 2012, you guys, how old were you all in 2012? Just somebody, if somebody could just populate on the chat, just to give me a grounding of that.
14.
14, 19, okay. 22, it just varies, okay. So teenagers, some of you are a little older, 7th grade, okay. So that just kind of frames me, and it frames you where you were. So, and some of you maybe weren't even on Facebook, your parents maybe didn't allow you. But over a 1-week period in 2012, researchers manipulated the news feeds for a random sample of close to 7,000 Facebook users. So as you know, the news feed is constantly updating and lists of content from your friends, and that's shown in the middle, or it's shown on your Facebook page. And you know, there's always the kind of the scam of, hey, cut and pasted this and now I get a whole new friends. There are algorithms, but I don't think you can manipulate it unless you cut out some people or don't follow people. But because in Facebook there are more stories than what we can be displayed, Facebook uses an algorithm that tries to show the stories that the users would find most engaging or relevant. So the people you interact with most kind of tend to show up, or the sites or the things that you follow kind of show up more. So what Facebook did is they took 7,000 users, and one group, they reduced any negative content. And in one group, they reduced positive content. And they used the linguistic inquiry and word count software, which is abbreviated LIWC 2007, to determine the emotionality of the content. So that's how they decided if the content was positive or negative. So the hypothesis was that the subsequent users' posts on Facebook would be affected by what they saw in the news feed. So for example, people in the positively reduced group, they aren't seeing as many positive posts, their own posts will be less positive. If the people's negatively reduced group would then subsequently have fewer negative posts. And the results supported the hypothesis that people's emotions may be affected by what their friends say. And that's in social theory, that's called social contagion, if you remember back from sociology. Social contagion happens during fans watching plays or sports. So this happened, and then the controversy came up that nobody asked those Facebook users whether they wanted to participate in this study. And it was assumed that in the Facebook data use policy, which you all agreed to if you started a Facebook account, informed you that your data might be used for such research purposes. So technically you did have some informed consent, but we all know that nobody reads all of that fine print. So there was questions. So among other things, Facebook uses information, it says, for internal operations, including troubleshooting, data analysis, testing, research, and service improvement. And I know I just read, I just look at it and I don't continue. I mean, I don't read it thoroughly. I just read it. So we aren't really going to pair up, but I want you to just think and share with us for the next few minutes. Think about these questions. What are some ethical issues raised by the study? And how could they have addressed the hypothesis without explicitly manipulating the content feed? So I'm going to ask you to think about that, and then ask you to collaborate and talk about that. What are the ethical issues raised by that Facebook study? If anybody wants to chime in.
Dr. Spencer, this is just like a little side note, but did you ever read up on the 23andMe issue where about their informed consent, because people would be sending in their DNA and 23andMe would be testing for cancers and things, even though they didn't explicitly ask?
Yes,
And
yes.
It was like a whole legal battle about this one woman had cancer, and the 23andMe returned her information after she explicitly only stated that she wanted family information. And they told her that she had cancer, and she's like, I did not ask for this. And even though like you think you're doing the right thing, it was like a whole big,
Right.
yeah.
And that is, I've seen that, and those are really interesting examples. We had the same thing just recently with COVID up in Seattle. The Seattle and the area, they were doing a study on influenza, and they were taking I don't remember if it was mouth swabs or blood, but they started finding COVID cases. And the study was only looking at what kind of influenza do you have? And then they started finding COVID cases. And so then they had this dilemma. Do we tell these people? And finally, somebody just broke it and said, yes, we're going to start saying we're having COVID here in the United States. So, Jacqueline is saying, and I want you to feel free to come in on mic or go ahead and type. But Jacqueline is saying, I think that depending on the season as well, negative posts could affect mental health. When some people may be looking to Facebook as a positive source. Testing someone or taking data from someone that doesn't know they're having data taken. That is the issue of informed consent. And I think there are a lot of things that we automatically sign off on. Think of any time you install new software and there's all of that verbiage, or that you sign into some type of a program. There's all this verbiage and we're like, yeah.
I was going to say, like, you don't really have a choice. You either like agree and sign your life away, or you don't get the program or the software. So it kind of like forces you.
Yeah. And again, the 23andMe, there may have even been some mild disclaimer or something that talked a little bit about that, but that the people weren't told directly that, oh, and by the way, we're going to look for anything genetically weird about you. Yeah.
Kind of like, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, kind of like what Katie was saying about how you have to sign the waiver or whatever. I don't feel like that's actually consent because you don't have a choice. Instead of being like, no, I would like to opt out of this option and still be able to be in the program.
Yeah, exactly. It's forced consent, and so you'll see in city training, they really look at that. What are the other options? If you don't want to do this, what's the other option? Amy is saying the researcher is responsible to ensure that everyone has given confirmed or informed consent. Doing so on the terms of use, it's not enough.
I was going to say too, like with the 23andMe thing, like I get how they could think that they're doing people a favor by including the other information, and maybe some people would be happy to not happy to receive bad news, but like grateful, I guess. But like other people don't want to know if they have cancer, and so that's like a mixed thing.
Right. I mean, they may have early diagnosis that may save their life, but on another plane, it could be that there's no treatment and they'd rather have had those months of ignorant bliss, before they found out. Same thing, there's genetic testing for, it used to be called St. Vitus dance, and I don't know why I'm thinking of that, but does anybody know the real name for it? Huntington's chorea. That's genetic, and it doesn't show until you're in your usually 20s, 30s, or 40s is when you start knowing you have it. But it can go in families, and some people want to live their life as if they don't have it, and then if they do have it, then they'll deal with it then. But some people, they don't want to know when they're 12 that they're going to have this debilitating disease until it shows up. On the other hand, there are other people that do want to know. And so that that knowledge is something that we want to control when we have that knowledge. Russell is saying, playing the devil's advocate. I love that, Russell. What would be a good alternative to that Facebook study if we asked for volunteers rather than collecting a random sample? Then the study, well, yeah, the study may be biased because people that volunteer they may not know which group they're in, but they may form that the people that volunteer may make up a certain type of people. But Catherine's saying it could still be randomized control trial though. And there may be ways to avoid bias. Yeah. And maybe you just say, we're looking at how you post. And you're either in this group or you're either in group 1 or 2, and we'll divulge to you afterwards what group you're in. Kind of like Priceline when you say, yeah, I want one of those hotels for this price, and then you find out later which hotel you're getting. But Veronica's agree. And then Megan's going back, send a specific policy update or something that explicitly informs users. Yeah. So these are issues that we see in informed consent. If you offer an incentive, you may gather enough randomization to avoid bias. Could be. Sahara is saying that I think people would post things in a way they wouldn't normally. Okay, I'm missing. Let's go back to Sahara. Yeah, it's a limitation of the study, or they post something that they wouldn't normally post if they knew people were watching, which is the Barnum effect, or there's a couple different effects of just by being observed and people knowing they're observed, they perform differently.
Dr. Spencer?
Yes.
Earlier in the chat, I wrote another ethical issue would be the collateral damage caused by the negative newsfeed.
Yeah.
So because it could affect the user's mental health, so wouldn't Facebook then be responsible for the aftercare and follow-up of all of those users?
They could be if they really tanked and ended up in the hospital. Yeah. That's Alex. Was that Alexia, that just said that?
Sarah.
Oh, it's Sarah. Okay. I can't move my eyes fast enough. Yeah. Who knows what it could set off if somebody's vulnerable. Yeah, these are excellent points. Ashley is saying she's a true crime fan and was listening to a case where the family's religion did not believe in an autopsy report, but one was done anyways and caused quite a bit of problem. So depending on one's religion, it could be quite controversial. Yeah.
Going back to incentive as well, when I was doing my research, our professor strayed us away from giving incentive, pay or something like that, because then you might be getting the participants may be giving you answers that they think you want in order to get the incentive.
Yeah, and you'll see that IRBs and informed consent will, if you're doing an incentive, you'll have to write it such that the individual understands that you get this incentive whether you answer how we want or not, or even if you can't finish answering. So yeah, that's something that we have to look at. When I was working with the cochlear implant study, because implants were still under investigation for children this was under age 3 and who were prelingual, part of that study was that anybody in the study got the surgery free and all the follow-up care and the implant at no price. And that we had to really work ethically to make sure that this was explained, that even if you don't like the implant, we're not going to take it out of your head, or we're not going to continue to serve you. And there's no penalty. So there's usually some type of verbiage that explains away or explains what that benefit is giving you, and what it doesn't take away from you. Excellent. Catherine, your child will do anything to get a sticker, yeah. And I'll do anything for chocolate, so yeah. Okay.
I'm on my way.
So yeah, so we've talked about some of those ethical issues raised by the study, and yeah, in certain cases we would have to prioritize. I think you can see that the consequences can be really incredible, from somebody being hospitalized to somebody just maybe being snappish or a little crabby that day. So there's a whole spectrum of consequences that could be raised. And yes, one way to address the hypothesis, they could have gotten some kind of consent, or if they didn't explicitly manipulate the content, they could just look to see what randomly happens. Like, if there is negative content, what is the person most likely to report? Or they could just take it as it is and code it and say, okay, this person's news feed had 10 positives and 2 negatives. Their next post, oh, what do you know, it was positive. So they could have done it without manipulation. So I think that's what I wanted to cover today, in that we're always thinking about ethics when we do a study. Sometimes there are things that you don't even consider that come up, and that's why you have an internal review board to look at it from a different angle, from a different pair of eyes. And that's why we have research laws now in the United States. We're not perfect, but we're making a very good effort to make sure that people's rights aren't infringed upon.
Something else that, like, ethics, especially when you're going through your IRB, is like deciding if you're working with a vulnerable population. Like, older adults were considered, like anyone over 65 were considered a vulnerable population until about like a year or so ago. So that like that upped your level of IRB like authorization, because you were working with a like what was considered a vulnerable population.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people didn't research into older adults, because they had to get that extra level of IRB.
Right. And when you do the city training, and as you go, you'll learn about who is considered vulnerable populations: children under the age of consent, prisoners, minorities, pregnant women. I can't remember. There are several categories that are included.
What does IRB stand for? I'm sorry.
Internal Research Board. And then city training is concerned in its training about how internal research boards make their decisions, and the rules and the ethics that they must follow. So Rocky Mountain University has its own internal research board. And as we go next semester and the semester afterwards, as you start identifying a study and what you're going to do, you may have to submit to our internal research board. And there's a full board, and there's exempt. And so depending on the nature of your project may be exempt. Or if you're using if you're doing a literature review, you're not using human subjects, human participants. So for each of you, we'll make that decision. of do we need to bring this to the internal review board or not. So that's why having that city training will give you excellent background for that. Okay, when I look to the right, that's because you're all on that screen. So, okay, everybody, any other questions? You're checking, just to check in, everybody's doing okay? Good, I like the head nods. And I thank you for getting up early today. I don't know your schedules yet, but maybe you have, I hope you have a little bit of a break. No, what do you have right after this?
Medical
Med-
SLP.
Medical.
Okay. Okay, so I will, all right. Well, there's no rest for the wicked, right? Or no rest for the weary. So I will actually end this meeting so that you can, again, log off and log on again. So bye, everybody. See you next week, if not before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, Dr. Spencer.
Yeah.
Was there anything that was due for next week?
Nope. You just do your reading. So these first few times we're going to be having discussions and some things. So no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.